Hello everyone. As part of our ongoing videos on police pensions, we're recording one today which will focus entirely on the public pensions consultation document that was announced by Her Majesty's Treasury. As usual, I'm joined by Alex Duncan, our National Secretary, and we're going to get right into asking a number of questions which have popped up around that consultation document itself. Bearing in mind the closing date for this is October, I believe.
It is.
And we will be issuing a formal response to that document. So without any further ado, Alex, are we happy to carry on and get some questions done?
Of course, yeah.
Right, so the first one I've got is, there's a number of proposals contained in that document, but is what is being proposed set in stone?
No, the whole purpose of a consultation document is to seek people's views and feedback and identify any issues raised, alternative possibilities, and then the government will consider that and make a final decision, which will come out.
When they're talking about the implementation date, for example, that's not set in stone?
Well, the implementation date, the short answer is no, and it's quite an ambitious timescale, if we're brutally honest. They can pick any date, really, that they feel that they can implement it. I guess there already, I know, has been some feedback saying that this date is earlier than would be ideal. They may yet change that date, or they may stick with it. Ultimately, it's up to them, and there's a number of hurdles they've got to be able to get over if they're going to meet that timescale.
As it's a consultation document, how can our members provide their views to this document, or provide concerns that they have to PFEW, so that that is incorporated in whatever response we give to the Treasury?
Okay, there's two ways members can get their views across. One is it's a public consultation document, which means that any member of the public, clearly including our members, has got the right to submit any concerns, issues, points they want to be considered direct as part of that consultation process. The other, and particularly in respect of making us aware of their concerns, I would suggest if they submit them through their local branches, the local branches are making sure, and I've had many already, making sure that that's passed on to us and we will consider them. Some of the things we've had raised come from a lack of understanding around some of the issues of pensions, which is understandable. It's an extremely complex subject, but what we are doing is we are looking very carefully with our team of experts at any of the points raised, and where we need to then raise that within our consultation response, of course we will do so.
Well, that's really useful, because it leads me on to my next question. Is there's been plenty of rumblings from all over anyone who's got an interest in this, that what is currently being proposed potentially causes further unlawful discrimination. So what assurances can you give our members, effectively, that all avenues are being explored, particularly mindful of issues around unlawful discrimination, that the Federation is looking at this?
Yeah, well, if I take you back to what I said at the start, this is a consultation. One of the very reasons you have a consultation is to flush out any issues. So it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be the end result. It means this is what we're thinking. These are what we're planning. Tell us if there's any showstoppers or any issues here that we need to think about or we haven't fully considered. From a Federation point of view, I've got a team at the moment of, I've got a number of QCs, a number of lawyers who have expertise in the area around pensions, both internal and external. I've got pension experts, so I've actually got a whole team of experts looking at each of these angles. And of course, as you'd expect, one of the things that we're paying particular attention to is around any discrimination or unfairness, so that we can flag that up. And likewise, as I say, any of the feedback we're getting from members, I'm sharing with members of that team for them to also look at and look, to see whether there are any issues.
Superb. So clearly, lots of work going on behind the scenes, particularly around the lawfulness of the consultation itself and what is being proposed.
The proposal, yeah.
So, with that in mind, Alex, when this advice has come back and we've put pen to paper and submit this to the Treasury, is that document going to be published from PFEW so that our members can see what we've put in it?
My starting point is I'd like to be as open and transparent as possible. So if it's possible to publish the whole document, fine. That would be my starting point. Clearly, I haven't seen the document because we haven't written it yet. And I've got to be mindful that if we put, depending on what legal advice we've included, it may be that we don't use any of the legal advice direct. The legal advice informs perhaps what we put in it, in which case happy to share it or to make it available to read. But until I've seen it, I can't make a definitive final decision on that because I'd be shooting in the dark, so to speak.
That's fine. In the event that does happen, will you at least be able to share key points?
Of course.
Of what's contained in it?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you. Lots of work being done around this response and pensions, but really the focus seems to be on our older in-service members. So, and when I say older in-service, I mean those who were previously on the 87 scheme or the 2006 scheme. But that's a long, long time ago, and you know we've got a huge amount of members who've come into the service on 2015. So what assurance can you give that we are looking at pensions in relation to those members? And more importantly, when I've read through that proposals, it seems to me that potentially what is being suggested is a detriment to those in the 2015 scheme.
Yeah, so it's no great surprise that this particular consultation is focusing on a particular group of people because it's about remedying the discrimination that occurred in respect of one group of people. There's lots of other things going on in the pension world at the same time, and in relation to the 2015 care scheme, and I think I've mentioned this before, but it's worth reiterating. Every 4 years that scheme gets revalued, and it's done by people called the Government Actuaries Department. The idea being to make sure that both the members, so our members, and in fact the employers are paying their fair share in. And if there is an imbalance, then that's addressed over the 4-year period that follows, and then they have another valuation, etc. So they did the revaluation, which should have taken effect from the 1st of April 2019, and found that the employers hadn't paid enough in, which meant that they were going to have to pay more in for the next 4-year period to make that good. This is good news for members, of course, because more going in from the employers means that you're getting more for your money. The government paused that because of uncertainty around the McLeod judgment and what was going to happen. And they've now announced, of course, they're going to take that pause off the revaluation process. However, they're going to include the cost of putting right the discrimination as costs spent on police pensions, which is true, they are spent on police pensions, and get the revaluation done again, including those costs. Now that, of course, will wipe out, certainly, any underpayment by employers, and may well demonstrate an underpayment by members. We don't know because they haven't done the work yet. And the way that would then need to be addressed, it would have to be considered by the Scheme Advisory Board. But broadly speaking, it usually means contributions go up, so your percentage you pay for your pension, or the benefits, the rate at which you accrue pension goes down, or a mixture of both. Now clearly, if you have joined in 2012, after the 1st of April 2012, and you're out of scope for any remedy, you're in the care scheme, you're at a position where at some point someone said, good news, the employer needs to pay more. You've then been told, well actually we're going to pause this. You're now being told that not only is the employer not going to pay more, but we're going to do the revaluation and factor in the cost of rectifying this for this older age group, and you can pay for it along with anyone else in the care scheme over the next period of time.
Well, that sounds inherently unfair, Alex.
Well, that would be my view. In fact, of everything I read when they released the consultation and this statement on lifting the cost cap pause, it was the thing that made me look at and say, well, this just cannot be right. We are clearly looking at this very carefully and looking to see what options we've got to challenge that. Now, interestingly, the Fire Brigade Union had already launched a judicial review in respect of the legality of pausing that process, which we're an interested party. So we don't know what the outcome of that judicial review would be, because clearly if they were successful, it would suggest the original valuation would stick. That might sound like really good news, but of course it would be less good news if it sticks for now, but then in the next valuation, all of this money gets stuck, that gets put in and included, because what you'll end is like a pendulum swing that's gone right over there and is now going to be off the scale over here, because the balance is all wrong. So there's a lot of work to be done on it. We are doing that work. It does feel to me inherently unfair. The problem is, it's not unusual in the pension scheme, of course, that younger people are paying benefits for older people. It happens all the time. It's happening at the moment. You and I pay pension contributions. That doesn't get invested in the market or put into some kind of shares. It's used to pay today's pensioners. So we are effectively paying right now for people who are on different pension schemes to us. And actually, some of them might have been on a better pension scheme than we will get. So it's not as if it's a complete, you can't do it. It's whether this crosses the line, and if it does, how it does, and what options we've got to challenge it. All of that work is ongoing, but it is the area I would flag up as being particularly concerning, because at the moment you've got a consultation document that says this is how we propose to remedy the discrimination, and sitting alongside it a document that says, oh, and you're paying for it.
So in short, our members who obviously aren't part of this remedy, we are still looking after issues that have been identified within that. So yes. When we talk about pensions, our focus and our attention isn't just on this remedy piece, it's on the entire membership, no matter what pension scheme you're in.
Absolutely. I mean, there's another group of members who were originally given assurances that they would be protected on the grounds of age. Because of and this is a fairly specific to the police service, because we retire younger. So you don't, and you've got to remember that one of the challenges the government's had is that with the cross-public sector approach, and they need to be careful they don't fall into the same trap this time, because the consultation relates to cross-public sector approach as well. But of course there are unique things about the police service and the police service schemes. But we had a group of people who were afforded protection purely on the grounds of age, which actually meant that if they chose to, they'd get more than 10 years protection.
Yeah.
If you look at this April 2022 cut-off date, that now means that, as of April 2022, everyone's going into care. And there are people who up until recently thought they were going to be protected for 11, 12, 13 years, now being told, well, 10 years you're out. It is unclear, because it's a cross-sector, public sector, whether the government have just not recognised the unique thing that goes on in policing, or whether they have taken a deliberate decision to end it in April 2022. And that's one of the issues, of course, we are raising and making the point that there are a group of people here, of the older group who will suffer as a result of this. There's a group of people who obviously are subject to the remedy, but are then expected to go into the care scheme, and I've just described some of the downside potentially of what they're doing about how that's paid for. So there's an element, it feels, of give with one hand, take with another. and there's a group of people who it appears to be, well, we'll just take. And they're the issues that we are clearly heavily focused on.
So with confidence, it doesn't really matter which pension scheme you're in or were on, we're looking at it holistically,
Yes,
across the board.
Of course. And that, you know, I remember there was quite a lot of noise from some around when we applied to be an interested party in respect of the remedy part of the current claims. And very much our driver was twofold. One was we needed to have an understanding of what was happening, because it was bound to link into the wider discussions around remedy. But the other as well was to make sure that there was no inadvertent decision that would have caused problems for another one of those groups. It is a challenge. You know, you're walking your way, it's like walking through a minefield and trying not to accidentally put a foot out of place. It's really quite difficult. You know, this consultation will have been through several government lawyers, and they will have had expert advice, and still we know people are raising quite legitimately concerns about what's proposed. It's not an easy subject.
Thanks. The next question I've got is, again, it relates to this date, you know, that's been muted, April 2022, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, you said you think that date's optimistic, potentially. I think that date's optimistic. But for a lot of our members, they potentially retire before April 2022. They've potentially been moved onto the care scheme already. And we've got officers involved in the ill health retirement process that are potentially going to be retired out of the organisation because of illness, but would not have their benefits calculated on the legacy scheme.
Yeah.
So how do these people get redress for this remedy when in fact it does take place?
You're absolutely right. I mean, because this is such a complex area, April 2022 seems incredibly challenging time-wise. Bearing in mind, at the moment, what we've got is a public consultation across, and that's the cross-public sector bit. Then the government are going to have to do something about laying some legislation once they've decided what they're going to do. Then you've got all the scheme-specific work that needs to go on. And you know, that's not easy. Dealing with one scheme's not easy, and I think we've already identified there's at least 3 police pension schemes alone and their interactions. And then there's likely to be potential, legislation that drops out of that needs to be done. And to do all of that by April 2022 is, incredible when you think how long it takes to get any piece of legislation through the House. And you're not just doing that for the service, of course, you're doing that for all of the public sector parts. In the meantime, and this has been going on really since the care scheme came in, people have been going out on ill health pensions. The government acknowledges that, and the reality is that there may come a time when enough is known to be able to calculate pensions based on what the outcome is. We're not there yet, we haven't even started the scheme-specific stuff. But more likely, they will be treated as if this hasn't happened, and then it'll be made good with that group of people who are in receipt of pensions, and the government have committed to this being prioritised. So, in some ways, if you've got another 5, 6, 7, 8 years to do, yes, of course, you want to know what is going to happen. But it's not having the day-to-day impact on your finances that if you're sat at home and that's your sole source of income, it is. So it's right and proper that they're going to prioritise that group, and that's what they've said they will do.
And when you say prioritise and make good, I'm assuming you're talking about, back pay or backdating calculations.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, well, what I'm saying is, so one of the decisions I've got to make at the moment is, do individuals have an immediate or a deferred choice? In fact, if you're already in receipt of a pension, it's irrelevant, right? You've got to make a choice as soon as they can give you the choice. They need to give the individual the information so they can make a choice knowing what it means. The individual then needs to make that choice. And if the choice is, well, actually all of that period I wanted in my old pension scheme, and if that then means that they're owed a shortfall of money, that's what it means to them, then they will need to pay that as if they've been in the old scheme all the way. And if that means, I'm making this up now, but if that means we owe you £100 a month since the date you retired, then it's X times £100 a month, here you are, and carry on paying
with
you
interest.
thereafter. We are having conversations about interest. We haven't landed on the figure, but there seems to be some acceptance that they may well have to pay some interest.
Superb. I think that's really reassuring, for officers who are looking to retire within that window or have retired through ill health.
Yeah.
The document itself, again, goes into an area called AVCs.
Indeed.
AVCs, and for those of you that don't know, AVCs are additional voluntary contributions. And, to lay people, you can read this and you can go, ooh, could I buy another couple of extra years whilst they're trying to make good this period? And so if I was going to go onto the care scheme at this date, but I was 2 years short, would I be able to buy 2 extra years in the gap until that happens? Well, what's the answer, really?
It's a very good question. You're right, the consultation period does talk about additional voluntary contributions. There's not a lot of detail in there, is the first thing I'd say. So there's a definite lack of clarity. And interestingly, we have asked previously, we've asked the Home Office for some clarity around the position of additional contributions. And unfortunately, we haven't had it. What is clear is that if an individual's in the 2015 care scheme at the moment, there is an ability to make additional payments. It's also clear when you read the consultation document that it talks about people who have purchased additional pension in their 2015 care scheme. If they subsequently elect to have been classed as if they were in their old scheme, that effectively the additional pension that they've purchased will be valued and the equivalent value given to them in the old scheme. So they'll put that extra. Now that doesn't mean year for year, obviously. It means it's given a value and whatever amount of time that would buy. So on the face of it, that looks possible. There are limits as to how much you can buy, and how keen scheme administrators will be to accept people. So I think if you've got one going on at the moment, that's fine. If people rock up tomorrow and say, I've just had this great idea, I'm not sure how keen they will be to accept that. And it is one of those areas that once we move into the scheme specific stuff, this will get looked at in a lot more detail.
But I'm sure that once we have that detail, that will be communicated.
Absolutely.
Because that, I think for a lot of people, if you have that opportunity to buy additional years, they're going to beg, borrow and steal to buy it.
They are. I mean, I strongly suspect the government will be alive to that and won't be too keen on the idea of people effectively buying full legacy pension, or as much of it as they can do. That's not what the whole remedy thing is intended for. But we'll see. We'll see.
Another question, Alex, is obviously this mention of weighted accrual or the double accrual guarantee. So this is a two-part question, really. Is do you want to explain what the double accrual guarantee is, or weighted accrual? And there's no mention of this within the consultation document. Should we be worried about that, really?
The double accrual was a fairly unique feature to the 1987 police pension scheme, because what it did, instead of people accruing their pension entitlement evenly over the duration of their career, they gain more in the last 10 years than they do in the first 20. So if you think of it as a pizza, where to get a full pizza you have to have a total of 40 bits. In the first 20 years you get 20 bits, so 1 bit a year, and in the last 10 years you get 2 bits a year, which gives you your other 20. So when they were looking to move people from the 1987 scheme across into care, it was pointed out that the lack of this ability to access the double accrual bit was unfair, and that was accepted. So when they were looking at how much time or how much of a 1987 pension you'd accrued, they basically worked out how big each pizza slice would be if instead of this double accrual at the end, you accrued it on an even basis, and then worked out how many of those pieces you've had, and that told you what you had. So that's what that's about. Why is it not mentioned in this? Well, it's not mentioned in this because this is the cross-sector public service pension document, whereas this is more a scheme-specific issue, and that comes later. So this is about the approach across the public sector, and then you would deal with things that are unique to particular schemes, such as double accrual, when you get into the scheme-specific stuff, which is yet to come. Do I think it's going to change? No. And the indications we've had so far from government is there's no intention to change that recognition that you need to deal with the double accrual and effectively calculate people's entitlement based on an even gathering of bits rather than loading it at one end.
So just for clarity, just because it's not mentioned doesn't mean it shouldn't apply.
Correct.
And the other thing is, folks, certainly worth looking at, particularly if you were one of those that transitioned from 87, because it only applies to 87, into 2015. You're not counting it in 60ths, you're potentially counting it in 50ths or 45ths even.
Yeah, it very much depends on how much of the pizza you gathered, if you like,
up
at the
until
time.
That point.
But yes, well, they will take account of the particular impact of that double accrual
being taken away.
Yeah.
Superb. Alex, the document also mentions overpayments and underpayments, and this is because when we look at the three schemes that we've got, the 87 to 2006 and the 2015, the highest contributing scheme is 87, the next one is actually 2015, and the lowest contribution is the 2006 scheme. So effectively, if this remedy takes place and people elect to go back to their legacy scheme, if they've been on care, some people are going to be asked to pay in more, and some people will be looking at a refund. Yeah. So the people that are looking at the refund, I'm sure, are smiling. But if I'm looking at myself, for example, my worry is that government are going to say, right, Shay, it's all very well you want to go back to 87, but this is how much you owe us, and we'd like a check within 28 days. Pay up. What is the document suggesting or talking about that? What's happening in discussions to alleviate or allay those fears?
You're absolutely right. There will be some people, depending on the choices they make, maybe due money back, and I think you're probably right in saying they'll be quite happy. There'll be other people that will have money to make up. There's a recognition it's totally unreasonable to say, 7 days or else. So they're looking at ways that, what are reasonable and proportionate ways of obtaining that underpayment back.
For many people, the sensible choice here is, just take it out my lump sum.
Yeah. And potentially, that may yet be an option. We haven't landed on the exact option. So they're looking at, there's a thing called scheme pays, which is used at the moment, particularly with annual allowance tax breaches, and instead of the individual, so you might get a tax bill in that case of say 5,000, and instead of you having to fine £5,000, you can ask for it to be paid by the pension scheme. They'll pay it, and then they pay you a slightly reduced pension when you retire to take account of the fact they've paid this tax bill. That seems quite attractive in some ways. The downside with scheme pays is the reduction is applied to your pension for as long as you get it.
Oh, right.
So it doesn't stop when you've paid back your £5,000, and obviously the longer you live, the more over and above the 5,000 you'll end up of paying, and that we don't think is right. So if they were going to use something like a scheme pays, we would be looking for it to cap and end once you've paid the money. They could, there's other forms of repayment plan, as we know. I mean, you could decide that if somebody owes £2,000 and they've got 10 years left to do, you could break it down and say, well, what does that look like if we sought to recover it over that period of time? It may be a mix and match approach. You may give people options if you can come up with a number of ways of doing it. Which,
so I suppose the easy answer to this is that nothing's been agreed, but we're certainly cognizant of
of course,
of the fact.
of course. I mean, the problem with the lump sum, which does seem attractive, and for the vast majority of people, you go, well, yeah, of course they're going to commute. But you'll know that you don't have to commute. And then what do you have with the individual who says, well, I wasn't going to commute? So, as I say, we probably need to come up with either an option that fits all cases or a range of options.
Perfect. Thank you. The last question here, and this is really about, this is off the back of the emails that I'm being inundated with, emails that you're being inundated with. And these are questions around the actual schemes and how the schemes work. And what's becoming really, really clear is that a lot of our members are struggling to understand the terms of the individual schemes. And what I often end up doing is having to pick apart what a member has written to me and used some of the 87 scheme mixed with some of the 2006 scheme, creating a whole new scheme. And I can understand why the confusion arises, because you look at these documents, they are lengthy and complicated. And for things like the 2006 scheme, you contribute up to 35 years. And the earliest retirement age on the 2006 is 55. Yeah. But we've got people on 2006 who think they can leave at 50. And with parts of the 87 scheme thrown into it. Is there anything we can do to assist these members? Like an easy guide comparator between the different schemes, the contribution rates, the lump sums, the retirement ages, etc., which they can go to and look at, or even stick up somewhere in the nick so people have ready access to it.
You're absolutely right. We are getting inundated by people who don't seem to understand what schemes they're on and what the schemes mean. So I suppose the first thing you need to do is you need to know what scheme you're on. That helps you then at least see what your benefits are going to be. There's a bit of a clue in the dates. So, people who joined before April 2006 would have been on the 87 scheme. And then, depending on whether or not they've had some form of protection about the move to care, may still be in the 87 scheme, or will now be in the care scheme. Mm-hmm. There's a very small number who were in 87 who elected and made an informed choice. People will remember this. When the 2006 scheme was coming in, we all received a small rainforest which explained the options and gave us the choice of either staying in 87 or going into 2006. So I think you'd know if you'd made a choice to move. Vast majority of people didn't move. It made sense for them to stay in the 87 scheme. Anyone who's joined from the 1st of April 2006 onwards is probably in the care scheme. Albeit, in both the cases, people who joined before April 2015 and were in the 2006 scheme will obviously have a period of time in that scheme, and likewise people who are in the 87 scheme will have a period of time. So I think that helps. Look at your annual pension benefit statement. So if you don't get an annual pension benefit statement, you need to be taking issue with your pension administrator, because they are legally required to do it. So you should be receiving every year a benefit statement that should tell you things like what scheme you're in, what, if any, other of these schemes you were in, and what that's accrued. And it should be giving you a forecast of what you are looking to get depending on when you retire. And it should give you a clue what your retirement dates are. It's there so that you are informed. So read it. You're paying a lot of money into this. Getting a lot back, but paying a lot in. It's worth a read. And then in respect of what each of the scheme benefits, and I know you've been doing a lot of work on this, and I'm really grateful. So in answer to all of these queries, I know you've pulled the bones out of each of the schemes that says things like, how much am I paying? When can I retire? What do I get? And we've got that, I think, into about as Janet and a John form as you can do with what is a fairly complex situation. And I know the plan is to put it on the website, probably alongside this video. so that people can use it and refer to it. And I think that's great. I think that's a really positive move, and should help people, once they know what scheme they're in, know what the benefits are.
Definitely. So, folks, hopefully by the time you've watched this video, there should be a downloadable document which should have those comparators, breaking the schemes down into their individual parts. Alex has, comprehensively explained to find out which scheme you were in or how much time you've got in one scheme as opposed to another. So use that document and print it off, put it round the nick, stick it somewhere where people are likely to see it, back of a door, perhaps. Alex, any more that you want to add to what we've already said?
I would just reiterate that, firstly, absolutely understand the frustration. People who, not unreasonably, want some clarity and answers about what their retirement plans look like. It is ironic, has to be said, that the government or successive governments have taken steps to encourage people to provide sufficiently to retire and to make sure that they have that clarity of information, things like annual benefit statements. And yet public sector workers are being denied that because of this whole mess that's gone on, and now it needs unpicking, and what does that look like? The picture is gradually clearing. We're not there yet though, and I guess we just have to recognise that it's going to take a little bit longer to get that full clarity. We are listening, we are alive to the issues being fed in, we are getting them looked at by the experts, and we will be raising any issues that need to be raised as part of the consultation, both at this stage and in the scheme-specific stage. Don't forget, this is the cross-public sector bit. We haven't got onto the scheme-specific yet. And we will be as open and transparent with that which we are putting in as is possible. So please keep your thoughts, views, comments coming in, either to that pension email address or via your local branch. And be assured we are listening.
Superb. Alex, as ever, thank you so much for your time and sharing what is really a confusing area for so many people. And I've said previously, and I'll say it again, a little pensions knowledge is dangerous, and a lot of pensions knowledge is equally dangerous. Folks, hope you've enjoyed watching that. As I said, this episode was really just to cover the consultation document. I appreciate we may not have got every single question answered, and there might be a burning question that you have out there. Please use the email address, as Alex has alluded to, and send them in, and we'll try and cover them off. Apart from that, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.